To pass a law and to fundamentally change the culture of a country are two very different things, yet are too often conflated. If passing a law meant transforming hearts and minds, then there would be no crime, no need to rally, to march, to resist. Let us agree then that laws are not magic, merely guidelines and aspirations, blueprints with consequences. Only the actions of people can transmogrify circumstances, correct the projection of a life's trajectory. That's why the motto is, fair housing makes us stronger, not the Fair Housing Act makes us stronger. An act, fair or not, is no consolation for the death of a king. We would have never chosen to bargain our soul for the recognition of our humanity to this day. The promises in that contract, signed in Martin's blood, are yet to be fully realized. But where laws, contracts, clever mottos, and nowadays even logic have failed, maybe story will be capable of opening even the most closed of minds and restoring humanity to spaces smothered by the bottom line. A single mother of an unfavorable hue is attempting the great American illusion. This magic trick has never been easy. No one ever taught her how to abracadabra her family from one side of the tracks to the other. She sees the miracle that could transform her family's future in the form of better schools and job opportunities. But her 750 credit score is attached to an application with a name that sounds too dark for the white side of town. As her spirit is cut in half by the blade of discrimination, her American dream is disappearing. When ignorance seems to always be in demand, who needs crooked laws to draw red lines in the sand? Wounded warrior, welcomed home, where we further wilt the tethered strands of the American flag draped over the coffins of those not lucky enough to make it back, only to face discrimination. The only home he can afford is not built to carry the weight of his sacrifice. No ramp, just faded glory. Our most vulnerable populations are waiting for us to engage. What does it say when America can no longer provide homes for the brave? There are a million stories just like this.
I looked around the city and seen many people without a home, and I thought that everyone should have a place and a place to call home.
About the way housing has shaped Birmingham over time.
Well, first I'd like to begin with the fact that Birmingham was founded 5 years after the Civil War, 1871. And after the Civil War, the South was decimated. The economy of the South was decimated. So the governor and legislature had to find a way to create new industries and bring them to the state of the population. They knew that there were tremendous natural reserves in what was known then as the Jefferson District. There was no city. During the Civil War, in Alabama, there was a Huntsville, there was a Mobile, there was a Selma, there was a Talladega, there was a Decatur, but there was no Birmingham. So the powers that be in Montgomery, the governor and the Alabama legislature, knew that there were tremendous natural reserves in what was called at that time the Jefferson District. Those reserves were coal, iron ore, and lime. One of the few places in the world in which steel could be made. And the governor wanted, and the legislature wanted to tap into that as a new economy to join the Industrial Revolution. So, the housing problem. They had the three ingredients needed to make money, but they were lacking one key event: cheap labor. So they went to the black belts of the South and brought up former slaves and tenant farmers and brought them up to the Jefferson District to work in the steel mills and the coal mines. When you think about housing in Metro Birmingham, you have to know that most of the steel companies and mine companies built their own communities for the steel workers, for the miners. Every community around these steel mills tended to be about 3 miles from downtown Birmingham. TCI, Sipico, all about 3 miles from the city, all of them, Thomas Foundry, Stockham. Tenant farmers coming up from the South needed housing, and so did the whites too. The housing stock started off basically as company houses, okay? The housing crisis in the 19th century was critical to Birmingham because they needed to house these workers coming here to work in the steel mills and coal mines. They pitted black workers against white workers for the purpose of cheap labor. They put both groups compete against each other so that they could suppress wages in the coal mines and in the steel mills. But housing patterns, it's not just to Birmingham. It's throughout the South and throughout the nation. In the North, they had clauses in the deeds which prohibited a white person from selling to a black person. But it was more astute and advanced here.
In 1926, a zoning ordinance was passed that laid the groundwork for segregation within Birmingham. Housing developments were divided based on race, and traces of the color-coded legend can still be seen today. We visited with Paul Bonchella, map conservator for the Lynn Henley Public Library, to view the original zoning map and to learn more about its history.
The map has not been in public eyes for a long time now. At the end of the segregation era, I think that one went into storage. These maps are rather rare. And this one came into existence because the Alabama legislature gave the city commissioners of Birmingham permission to establish a zoning board, and they did so in 1923, and 3 years later the zoning commission came up with a map that was to divide the city racially. We need to realize that there was a time when people wanted to divide cities racially, that they wanted to keep the races separate from each other for whatever reason, and that it was actually legal for them to do it. They actually had a legal basis for enforcing that segregation. We're looking at the 1926 zoning map of Birmingham, and it has a legend to it. It shows you the different types of districts that there are that were set forth in the ordinance, and it shows you what their location is. Birmingham did have a precedent for redlining, and it started in 1915 when the state of Alabama gave the city expanded police powers because they were concerned there were tensions among the races and they wanted to keep peace and so on. And as a part of that, the city of Birmingham took the authority to create this sort of redlining that you call it. And that's basically the basis for this map.
Can you show me on this map the districts that would have fallen into that law or that act?
Okay, I think the two types of districts of interest to us would be the residential districts. Okay. There's A districts and B districts. A districts have lower density population in them because they have only single family housing in them. The B districts allow for duplexes, apartments, hotels, that sort of thing, so it's higher density population. And this key shows you exactly where these districts are located. A district is the low population one. Every area in yellow on the map is that. And the B districts are shown in pink. And the African American sections are shown with these crossbars, these diagonal slashes on them. So if you look on the map and you're looking for an African American area, you would look at where there are diagonal lines. For example, in this section here, which is now North Titusville and South Titusville, was designated for African Americans. Whereas if you look at the south side, you'll see it's almost all yellow and solid pink, no African Americans in that area whatsoever.
Okay, so we are 50 years later, or even much later, from 1926 when this
Yes.
map was created. How similar is Birmingham today to the map that we see now?
It hasn't changed much in certain areas. I can tell you from my own experience, I live in the Titusville area over here. It's still predominantly African American in that area. And the Smithfield area adjacent to it is still predominantly African American.
Why do you think that is?
I think people get used to living where they live, and they often don't move. I'm sure in the past they didn't have the opportunity to move to other parts of the city, so they became established in a section and they stayed there.
The Fair Housing Act is a federal act in the United States intended to protect the buyer or renter of a dwelling from seller or landlord discrimination. The legislation was the culmination of a civil rights campaign against housing discrimination in the United States and was approved by President Lyndon B. Johnson 1 week after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Calls for open housing were issued early in the 20th century, but it was not until after World War II that concerted efforts to achieve it were undertaken. The Fair Housing Act was enacted as Title VIII of the Civil Rights Act of 1968.
Well, the Fair Housing Act simply is a federal mandate that all people are treated equally in any type of housing transaction. Life for home buyers before the Fair Housing Act was in many instances a very negative experience. I can't say it's not negative now, but not as much. Definitely things have changed, many things have gotten better, but we still do entertain clients who have experienced discrimination in sales.
When we as a real estate agent and we are a realtor go out to a home, and it gives us an opportunity to educate that seller, because in our contracts with that seller, there's a whole clause that deals with the discrimination and spells it out. And I think that where we might be missing the boat sometimes is maybe being in a hurry to get that listing signed and you skip through certain things. We need to always take that opportunity to explain to them what that clause means, that we don't discriminate. And so many of them will say things like, well, I don't really want to sell too. Well, we need to take that a step further. We took an oath when we became a realtor. We have that code of ethics to back us up, but we also have the law to back us up too.
It's really a service industry when you look at it that way, whether you're helping that first-time home buyer or you're helping that person on that second or third house. You're helping them to build a life together for their family, leaving a legacy, hopefully a good economic legacy for their children or their grandchildren, and just getting started in this world, realizing that dream of home ownership can be theirs, and it's not that hard to achieve.
I hope we're not having this kind of discussion in 50 years. I hope this is not an issue in 50 years, because I won't be here, thank God, but I'd be almost 100. But I hope it's not an issue. It shouldn't be an issue now. I mean, it absolutely should not be. Hate and discrimination are taught. They're learned. There's no question about it. And it comes from fear, as Michelle said. And if you don't understand something or you fear it, you become bigoted toward it.
Years ago, we bought a really large company and inherited what we thought was a very small fair housing issue. As a matter of fact, it was expressed to me to the lawyers that represented the other side, it won't take you but just a little while to fix it. So we did investigate it and really thought that was the case. However, the Justice Department came down to Birmingham. The Fair Housing Council from Washington came down to Birmingham, and the local Fair Housing Council in Birmingham met with my partner and me on a Saturday, and I had no idea that it was to the degree that I learned. Some months later, we were sued, and we developed a fair housing plan, business plan for our company, and we did some extensive training on what do you do when someone calls on the phone and they want to look at a house and you don't know who they are or what they are, if you will, or whatever class of life they may be. How do you respond? And we learned through some hardships, if somebody wants to look at a house, rent a house, or buy a house, if they got the money, it doesn't matter what class of those 7 classes that you are in, you have a right to look at it and you have a right to buy it. And that's the bottom line of the fair housing law.
It's not just an issue here within the Birmingham area. I realize we have a history here in the Birmingham area, but I have been afforded the privilege to work on a national level with different agents from across the U.S. It is an issue across the map. There are people who, like you said, Jeffrey, will try to manipulate you to make up their mind on selling to someone of Asian, Latino, or Black, because they want to know, well, this neighborhood, my neighbor will be upset with me if I choose to sell this home to whomever, and it's not their picture perfect type family dwelling. So it's not just Birmingham, it is across the map, and it's something that we do need to address. It is 2018, but it's still a major problem.
When I look at diversity, I look at my own background, and I'm a Latino. I was born in Colombia, educated in the States. Very grateful for the opportunities that I've had. And when I look at my relationships across all sectors, the one thing that I find out is, in talking to people, we all want the same thing. And it doesn't matter whether you're white, Black, or Hispanic, or Asian, or any group. Who doesn't want a stable economy? Who doesn't want the opportunity for home ownership? Who doesn't want the opportunity to educate their children, raise a family in a safe environment, to worship where they want to worship in the manner that, who doesn't want those things where you come from, right? So I think that when you have a sensitivity to the fact that we're all trying to get to the same place, then you can remove a lot of barriers and eliminate the costs of, that go along that are inherent in a discriminatory environment.
We composed a focus group of Birmingham homeowners who shared their experiences in housing discrimination well after the Fair Housing Act of 1968 passed into law.
And I realized that my parents had moved into this all Caucasian neighborhood. My mom said, well, Donna, we are looking toward the future for you. This is a part of what we have to do. So the next morning I wake up and our house is completely covered with raw eggs.
He said, apparently these people, the Huggins, are above average Blacks. They appear to have money. Then he went on to say, do these people, the Huggins, know where they are moving to? That there were rednecks in the woods, and in the wintertime it would be wide open there, and bullets had no eyes, and he was not going to build a fence to keep bullets from coming over. And he also stated that his wife was thoroughly pissed off because blacks were building next to them. And not only did he call us blacks, but he called us the New World as well.
They moved on Westmoreland, and we were a young couple just married. And we had chosen a house on that very same street, but had heard about all of the things that your family had gone through. I had just started teaching, and I was not going to be at home 24/7. It was like people had to watch the house, the egging, the burning of the cross, and everything in the flag that was on that house. It was a day-to-day thing. And the more I thought about it, I said, I really don't need this. I think there was a lot of deterrent because at that particular time, there were no other blacks living in Fairfield, and you would think that this should not happen in Fairfield. But it was a very segregated type of environment where on one side of Arnold we had all whites.
Right.
And that was the area that you all moved in, very nice homes. On the other side, you had all blacks.
And made me aware that unless you know what you want, we accepted segregation because we didn't know what was out there other than we heard about integration and equal rights. But if you don't make an effort to gain that position, things will go on. My situation in housing law, number one, I was married a beautiful girl from Florida, and I want to put her in a nice place. So I selected the penthouse apartment on top of Red Mountain for our first home. I was smart enough to know that talking black, I was not going to get an interview. So I called one of my white friends and said, I want you to be black. For me. And I told him what I wanted to do. He said, yeah, I'm for it. So we drove over to the penthouse apartment. We called and made a reservation. We went in and then he showed us, oh, this is lovely. And he had not introduced himself, I had not introduced myself. So she assumed that the white guy was renting the facility. So I got to the end, she looked at me and said, Mr. Robertson, that's going to be $750. He said, I'm not Mr. Robertson, this is Mr. Robertson. She said, oh my God, let me call my husband. So she called his husband came, and I looked at him and I said, based on the law, are you going to tell me I can't? You going to tell me no? I just need you to tell me that now, so I know what I need to do. Can you tell me why I can't?
Racist is still an issue. It's an issue that we still, given all the research that has been done, it is still an issue that we have not dealt with.
We still need education in fair housing. We still will have to investigate allegations of discrimination because you cannot completely change the minds and hearts of everybody. So even after 25 years for us and after 50 years of the act itself, there are still persons who have continued to violate the act, and there are persons who will continue after these 50 years, but we are praying that it will be fewer after this.
We're the South, and the South has always been looked down upon, going all the way back to the history of the 60s, I think. I truly believe, and I'll tell you where this comes from, I truly believe that the South is more advanced than other parts of the nation as far as dealing with this very topic. Anybody who has a sense of decency about them will look at that past and say, we got to overcome that. We can't, that's not how we need to be nowadays. And I think because of that has probably caused us to maybe have a greater reaction to these issues than people in other parts of the country. I really do believe that. I've got classmates that are from all parts of the nation, and when we talk about issues and things, I'm quite frankly surprised to see the way some of them talk about housing issues in the Northeast or in the Midwest or in the Far West.
Well, I mean, fair housing is a serious topic. It's absolutely a serious topic because it's livelihoods. It's literally the definition of having a home or being homeless. And for so many folks, Big Mama's house is the difference between being homeless and having a base from which you can grow from. And in a city that has crushing poverty, we have a 30% poverty rate, 42% for women and children. So everything isn't great. That's why the Mayor's Strategic Plan speaks to allocating resources in the right direction, or in the direction that creates opportunity for the most of us. Not just for the least of us, but for the most of us. And there are way too many people who don't have those opportunities. So, you know, there's so many things to say about fair housing. At the end of the day, it's about having a home and ensuring that Birmingham represents the type of home that this nation and what it laid out to do for all of its citizens. And so that's why this is so important to us. Birmingham's story has always been a proxy for the national story. We represent the consciousness of the nation. So for us to get this right is huge. It's so incredibly important. So we're motivated not just by the numbers. That's important. Equity is important. Having a home is important. There's so many things that let us know that this work matters. But I think above all, there's a higher calling and there's a higher purpose for this space and this work.